All right, we have got it recording. Okay, so welcome everybody to this Zoom. I wasn't sure how it would work out. I was hoping Sunday night would be a good night where everybody was kind of in and it's winter time and we've got some time to kind of think about what we want to do going into the year, what adjustments we need to make, what worked last year, what wasn't working, and how we can move forward with that. And having the right bit is so important, and just the right equipment in general is such a it's just a thing that we can eliminate. If we're having problems, we can always check our tack first and say, okay, everything fits or this doesn't, whether it's a bit or a saddle, or if our reins are too long or whatever it is. Those are things that we can do that are really simple, to make those changes and make our horses more comfortable, or ponies. An uncomfortable horse or an uncomfortable pony, you can't blame them for acting up or not acting correctly. For those of you who are familiar with the Performance Pony Company, and those of you who aren't, that's why I started it, was because I had all these kids coming in for lessons and I was buying and selling some of my own ponies. And what I ran into is like, I couldn't help the kids as a coach. I couldn't blame the ponies for being naughty or frustrated or doing things that they weren't supposed to, because the things weren't fitting them and they were uncomfortable and irritated, and the kids were getting frustrated. And I was like, gosh, like, what can I do about this? And I don't have the right tools. Well, my hands were tied and I was getting paid to help people that I couldn't help. So the first thing I did was made a junior cow horse bit for a pony, and that has changed the pony industry for so many. This is my nice little horse who is here for demonstration purposes, but he likes to be really in the picture, I guess. So anyway, as you guys have questions, this is for you. I want to be able to open this up and answer whatever questions you have. First, I'm going to go over just a few of the basics about a few different kinds of bits. Now, as you can see, I have a whole wall of bits, and this isn't even probably a third of the bits that we own. Gosh, he's really in the way. Let me tie him up somewhere else quick. Okay, if it was his face instead of his butt, it would be better, but we don't need to see his booty. Okay, so I'm gonna start, we'll start the snaffle bit. So this here is just a twisted wire snaffle bit. And if you guys can't see or you want to see something different, please just unmute yourself and ask. I just have my phone out here tonight, so I'm doing what I can so you guys can see. So twisted wire snaffle bit. This is an O-ring. It's an O-ring because it looks like an O. A D-ring looks like a D. The difference is that a D-ring is going to be fixed. That means it's not going to slide. They also use the word gag. It's not going to have any gag. Anytime a bit slides on the cheek piece, they call it gag. So when you hear gag bit, that's what this means. Whether this is a gag on a snaffle, or we have this bit here, which this has a lot of gag. You can see how that bit slides all the way up and down there. So what gag does is when we pull on the reins, that says, okay, I'm going to start putting a little bit of pressure on the pony or horse's mouth. Pressure, pressure, pressure. And then once it gets to the top, it's like, okay, like you've had a chance. Now it's time to really pay attention. So it gives the horse a chance to react to the pressure before it's full pressure. So that's a lot of times why we like to start with a gag, like with a twisted wire snaffle, because that horse has a chance to react and to learn without it being full pressure all the time. A lot of our kids that ride the ponies and stuff, we like them to start in like the junior cow horse bits because they have a little bit of gag. So as their hands are learning how to apply pressure and what pressure to apply, if they get a little overly aggressive, it's not just constant contact ripping on that pony's face all the time. There's a little bit of warning before it becomes fully engaged. So they're a little bit more forgiving. The other thing about a snaffle is, okay, so when you put this in your horse's mouth, when you pull back on those reins, this is going to go up. Okay, that's going to go up. This is going to roll onto the bars of their mouth and a little bit of the tongue. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so when you pull, and if you get up to here, that's going to be all the way up in the roof of their mouth. That's when they are going to be like, how do I get away from this pressure? So once they start to come back down, we have to make sure that we release with our hands. Otherwise, those horses are going to start looking to get away from that pressure with their mouths up in the air. Because when they get up here, then they can flatten that bit out. So if you have a horse that's rooting into the bit all the time, it's probably because you have a bit, either a ported bit or a twisted wire bit like this, and they don't like the roof of the mouth pressure, or we're not relieving that pressure enough. So they're trying to get away from it somehow, and that's their only option at that point in time, is to get away from that pressure, is to throw their head up in the air so that this flattens out. Because when they're up there, then our hands are pulling like this instead of down here, so the bit functions that way. Does anybody have any questions about snaffle bits before I move on? Okay, perfect. So because I've got it here, we'll go to the gag bit. Actually, we'll go to this one. So when we go from a snaffle and we're like, okay, I feel like my horse is really going, like I like to keep a colt or a younger horse, or even my finished horses, I'll go back to a snaffle when I'm just trying to tune them up and just soft ride or trail ride. I'll do that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. The next step up, my favorite bit to transition them to is a 3-piece. This is an Ed Wright bit. You can use, it's a 3-piece dog bone. A dog bone because it looks like a dog bone in the center. So this does not really have any of the roof of the mouth pressure. That dog bone, it's gonna lay across the horse's mouth. This will be on the bars. So like when you're trying to figure out what a bit feels like, put it flat on your hand. So the outsides of your hand are gonna be the bars. The middle is gonna be the tongue. Okay, we can't really do the roof of the mouth because we don't have anything on top, but it'll kind of give you an idea just when it sits there, what that pressure is gonna feel like. So this is more like bar of the mouth, maybe the side of the tongue a little bit, and then it will push down on that tongue with the dog bone. So what I like about this is that it's independent. It's still got plenty flex. The more your bit moves, the more flex it's going to incorporate with your horse, generally speaking. Again, every horse is totally different, and so they're not all going to be the same, and everybody's hands are different. So if you listen to this and you try a few things, you're like, man, that's just not quite working, then you might find that you're not a gag bit person. There are some people who don't ride gag bits at all, and there are other people who ride all gag bits. So a lot of that depends on your hands as well. But this one, it's just similar. It's got the gag, and then we have a little bit of shank, which is the bottom. So shank, when they talk about a shanked bit, the shank is from the bottom of the bit ring. This would be the bit ring because that's where the bit's attached. So from the bottom of that to where your reins attach is the shank. When you hear them say purchase, purchase is from the top of the ring to the top. So the top part is the purchase. Okay. So the amount of purchase and the amount of shank you have helps determine the amount of collection you're going to get. Well, when we've got colts and younger horses, or horses that are sensitive mouth, they don't need all of that. If we start adding a lot of purchase and we get a long purchase and a long shank, they're going to get all bunched up and they're not going to know what to do with it because they're sensitive enough that they don't need it. So this is a good transition. Once we transition to this, we also add the curb. So this is a chain curb. I use this bit on a lot of horses. When I start a colt or transition them into this, I'm going to keep my curb fairly loose. When I'm on an older horse or a more finished horse, I might snug that up a little bit. And kind of a rule of thumb when you have your curb on is when you put 2 fingers flat against the back of their chin and you pull back on it, you want to feel some pressure. When they're just laying there, you don't want to feel any pressure. It's kind of a rule of thumb on your leather and your chain curbs. If you have a sensitive horse, you can use a leather curb. If you need a little bit more, you can use a chain curb. If you need even more, you can twist the chain so that it doesn't lay flat. Generally, it's going to be fine if it lays flat. If you're having to twist your curb, you probably want to look at your hands, your body position, and that more than your horse's teeth. That's a huge deal. If you're having any issues with your bit or your horse shaking his head or just never happy with anything you put him in, make sure that you have your horses done at least once a year by your equine dentist. In my opinion, I don't use a vet for an equine dentist. Their job is to take care of my horse. Like, I'm not going to go to the doctor and ask them to look at my teeth. I'm going to go to the dentist, right? Because the dentist has a deeper education. They've spent as many years getting their teeth knowledge as the doctor does his doctor knowledge. Well, it's kind of like a vet and being a dentist. There are some vets that have extensive knowledge, but most of them are so swamped with other stuff that they can do the simple stuff, but they can't do the intense stuff. So if you can find an equine dentist, you're going to be better off in the long run. Does anybody have any questions about this bit? No, we're good. Okay. So from there, let's see. This is just a chain bit. This one does not have any gag. You can see that this one maybe just it wiggles is all, maybe 1/8 of an inch. It has a short purchase and a longer shank. So this is going to give me a little bit more collection. It's going to ask for a little bit more break at the pole. And then we've got this chain. So when I put this on my hand, it's going to lay flat across my entire hand. So we've got more tongue pressure with the chain bit. Right now I'm using this bit on a little horse that I rope on who she's just really stiff. She's kind of built to be stiffer. That's another thing to keep in mind. I want my horses to be soft, but I also have to look at their conformation. This little horse is she's solid. I mean, she's a tank. She's got a short neck but a big body. Like, she's not going to be really bendy and flexy. Her body does not allow that. So I rope on her right now, but even if I go to run barrels on her, I'm not going to ask her to do a lot of the bendy flexy stuff that I'm going to on my 16 hand long moose, because their body types are different and she can't physically do it. God didn't make her that way. But I am going to help her because she still needs to be soft in order to use her body correctly. Right now, what she wants to do is what I call hollow out. You'll hear the term hollow out. And that means that, like, when they go to stop, like, she'll get kind of on her butt, but then she'll push her nose out and pick her front end up kind of funny and push into that bit. I don't want her to do that. When she goes, I want her to collect and feel good about it and not push into that bit so much. So this seems to be helping with that. She seems to like it. But we're playing around with that. Our goal in our horses, like I said, when they stop, is not to do this, but to do this. Just like us as humans, horses' bodies will mimic our bodies. So every move that we make on the ground, if you're struggling with, like, man, how should my horse be moving? Just get down on the ground and walk and feel your hips, because a horse's hips move just like ours. So when you get off and you're like, they just won't pick up their left lead or their right lead, then you can get off your horse, stand on the ground and think, what is the first move I make if I'm going to step forward with my right foot? And then you can look at that and you lift up with your right leg and your right hip, and then you step into it. You almost rock back a little on your left and you take that step. So if you're struggling with your leads, you can make that same motion on your horse. You can kind of load your left hip a little, open your right so that you're not pushing down on that right shoulder, because they need to be able to elevate their shoulder and their hip to move off too. It's not really about bits, but it is a side note that's important to remember. Same thing when they turn. If you're going into your turns and you think your bit's not working, but if you're turning and you're coming up over them and you're leaning on them like this, well, you're loading your weight on their shoulder. Well, their shoulder has to be able to get up and around that barrel. So if you're up here in your saddle and not back here where they can reach out, you're going to have problems there too. So staying centered and thinking about how your body moves is really important, because your horse will mimic yours. Okay. Any questions about the chain bit? Yes, Sierra.
Is a chain bit smoother than or softer of a bit than a twisted wire snaffle?
It depends on your horse. In my opinion, for the most part, yes, because it lays softly across the tongue. Now, if you take this chain bit, some people think that chains are aggressive. They are not, unless you take your hands and you start doing this on a horse's mouth, which you should never do. But if you do that, then it's going to be more aggressive than your twisted wire. But we don't want to seesaw on our horse's mouth. Okay, does that answer your question? And I can't see everybody in the screen too. So if you have a question and I don't answer it in that time, go ahead and unmute yourself and just tell me. Okay, so from there, we'll go to this bit. This bit is kind of, it's not a ported bit. It's a 3-piece. We still have the twisted wire. So what the twisted wire does is it just adds a little texture. It adds a little texture that has a little bit more grip. So when we pull, it's like, oh, there's something there. Versus if it's smooth, that's going to slide across their tongue a little bit more. And if they're not really responsive, this just gives you a little bit more leverage on their mouth. So this ring is kind of cool. You have a little bit of the action of the port, but you have some tongue pressure on it too. The way that the tongue sits in the center there is kind of interesting and fun. This is a bit made by JD Morrow. He makes pretty much all of my bits now. I met him a few years ago. So aside from the bits that I have that I just collected before him, now if I need something for a horse, I just call JD and I'm like, hey, this is my problem. This is what's going on. And so I call him. So I really like this bit. It's a step up from my cow pony bits. It's got a little bit more leverage to it. My shank is going to be longer here. I still have a short purchase, but I got more shank. So I'm going to get a little bit more whoa and a little bit more stop in that. Their hind end's going to drop under them just a little bit more with this bit. So that's a good one. This is going to be something that I like to use too. I personally like to start with the short gags. I don't go to something that's solid all the way across until I have to, but that's my hand and my style. But he's in here by himself and he's getting tired of it. So this one is a Molly Powell bit. I really like this one for running barrels too. It's got the shank. It has a little bit more purchase, and this one has a gag. So that's kind of nice for a port. It's a chain port. Whenever you have a chain bit, you have to make sure too that these twists don't get bound up before you put it in their mouth. And I would just drop this one earlier. So now it's all bound up. Okay, there we go. All right. So this port, the tongue is going to come up into that port, and you're still going to have, this is going to go up into the roof of their mouth a little bit more. And it's also going to come further back on their tongue. So it's going to create a different kind of pressure. It's a little bit, it's going to give you more leverage. It's got the chain, so you're going to get the more leverage that a ported bit gives, but you'll still have the flex and bend that like your chain bit does. So that's nice. Unless you have a really stiff horse, you're probably not going to rope in this very often. I use it on some of my stiffer horses, but because it has that flex, when you're roping, generally you want to keep your horses flatter. If you're heading steers, you might use a bit like this to lift their shoulder, but most of the time it's more straight line type stuff. So you don't want that bend and all that shoulder movement. You want those shoulders to be square. Whereas when you're running barrels, you want those shoulders to move and lift a little bit more. So that's that. Again, we have the chain curb on there. And I'll go over how we want these to fit in a little bit. Any questions on that bit? Nope. Okay. This bit is going to be similar to that one. It's going to not, it doesn't have as much gag, and it has a shorter shank, and it has a little bit more purchase than that. So you're going to have a little bit more break at the pole with this bit than what you did with the last one, but it's not going to have as much leverage to get that whoa as the last one did. And when you see a bit that is like that, I don't know if you guys can see that, how it's rolled in copper. You guys see that? Okay, so you'll also, right here is the very end of that. You really want to make sure if you have a bit that is rolled in copper, that it does not come off. Sometimes those welds will break loose and then that will be poking your horse in the mouth, and you dang sure don't want that. The other thing about copper bits that you want to be careful, copper and aluminum. I don't mind copper to a certain extent. The inlays, they help create salvation. That's why we use sweet iron. Like when you see like a lot of our chains, a lot of bits have black on them. That's called sweet iron. And then if they're rolled in the shiny copper color stuff, well, that's the copper. And what that does is it increases salvation. Just like us, we don't like to have dry mouth. Well, our horses don't either. If you put an aluminum bit in their mouth or a steel bit in their mouth, they're going to be more likely to, like, they don't like that as much. But the copper is a soft metal. So what that means is over time, if you've got a horse that chomps on the bit or bites on the bit, you'll see that there will start to become dents in your bit. And that can also cause like little slivers of copper that will come loose, and that can cut their tongue. So your more expensive, higher quality bits will not have copper like that in them. They might have copper inlaid. Like this bit here, you can see that this mouthpiece has copper rolled around it and it's sweet iron. But it's not going to be pure copper because that's not generally what we want to see. It's the cheaper metal and it's just too malleable for that. I'm going to come back to this bit real quick. This one has a lot of gag. So if you've got a really stiff horse that really wants to dive into barrels and stuff, you're going to want to work them, not necessarily in something with this much gag, but you can, depending on, you know, what you're trying to fix. This is going to give them a lot of warning. And when they're wanting to push into it, like if they're used to hitting that bit and pushing into it, this isn't going to get this. This is going to say, I'm not giving. Like you're going to keep pushing and it's going to keep going. And when they're used to hitting it and sticking out, it's going to say, nope, 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 nope. And pretty soon they'll start coming back around to you. So this bit's really good for stiff horses or really heavy-handed riders. It's good for heavy-handed riders too, because if you find yourself and you're wanting to pull really hard and your horse is doing this away from you, when you have a little bit more gag in your bit, then as you pull, and there's nothing wrong, you want to work on having soft hands, but some people are just naturally heavier handed. They're just stronger. Like men are just as good of horsemen as women, and women are just as good of horsemen as men, even though a man is naturally going to be stronger handed, right? It's just how God made us. So it's just learning what your hands and your tendencies have, so that you can adjust to that. So this is going to just be a little more forgiving. If you tend to pull really hard, this is going to give your horse a little bit more of a chance to react before that's fully engaged. This one also has a roller on it. Does anybody know what a roller is for? Anybody? No? Okay. So a roller is just like a distraction. It's like a fidget spinner for a horse. So it's something that if you have one that is always wanting to gnaw on something or is always just fiddling with its head or chomping at the bit or just bored, or even if they're anxious, get one with a roller. It might get really annoying, but it will also help keep them from constantly fiddling with other stuff, and it can help release anxiety. If you've got a gait sour horse, that's something that they can turn to as a comfort deal for them. Now this bit is going to be different than anything that we've looked at. This one is like, this is a mullen mouth. It's got a little bit of a port. So this is 100% solid all the way across there. I'm not usually going to use this on a barrel horse because it's going to be a little too stiff, unless I have one that somebody has spent a lot of time on their neck, and I call them like, they got like a rubber neck. because they're so rubbery and loose, then you're going to use something stiffer. But if I have a horse that wants to fiddle around and be silly in the roping, I really like to use this bit. Since it's so wide around, that's something that will determine the severity of your bit as well, is the width around the diameter of your bit. Yes, ma'am. Chelsea. Are you still muted? You're still muted.
Is that one also help with stopping?
It can. Yep. It can help with stopping as long as your horse is responsive to it. It can also be like, wow, that's way too much, because when you pull on this, you're pulling and asking for instant action. There's very little forgiveness. So your forgiveness has to be in your hands. Once they stop, you have to make sure that you give, because this is solid all the way across. So I like to rope in this one, or on like a really rubber-necked horse. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I know the rope one.
What's that? You're kind of broke up there. Oh, now you're frozen.
I also know that something is better.
There you go. Go ahead.
I know that I use something that also stops my horse, especially in roping, because when you need to stop, I know I use something solid.
Yeah. Yep. Solid can help. Like if you really want your horse to stop, you're going to use a bit like this. This has no give and it has the port. This does have a roller in it at the top. So if your horse is bored, it can roll. This one has the copper inlays in there in the back. That's what a copper inlay means. But when you go to pull, you've got the roof of the mouth. You've got like, this is a whoa now kind of bit. Like we're not messing around with this one. If you've got one that likes to run off, this is one that you can put on them. If you have a horse that runs off and you just go to the barrel race and you put this on them, you're asking for a wreck. You don't want to do that. You want to work your horse into that so that they're not totally shocked when you do it. But then when you do ask them to stop, they'll be more respectful of that. Okay.
Okay.
So this bit is a miler bit, and this one's going to be kind of like the last one. You've got that more solid feel to it because it's solid all the way across. So when you pull back evenly with both hands, it's solid like the last one. What's really cool about this bit, and I also sell this for the Performance Pony Company, it's called the Whoa Trigger. So it doesn't have quite the shanks and it's pony size. But this has still a little bit of flex in it because when I pull with the right, it's going to go to the right, left, same thing. So it's got a little bit more bend in it than what just your solid mouthpiece is going to have, but you still got the whoa when you pull back the longer shanks. So this is a really good bit for a horse that rubber necked, and you still like, you can use this for the barrels and pulls, or I rope on it a lot, just depends on what your horse is. But this is a really good bit to have in your toolbox. Okay, now let's talk about, oh, I grabbed the wrong one. The hackamore. Does anybody here use hackamores? No hackamore users? Okay, I used to be like, no way am I going to put this thing on my horse that is like a fire breathing dragon and expect it to stop, like, or to turn or to do anything. You know, this is like a 1,200 pound animal. How is this simple little rope nose going to stop that horse? You know, that's what I used to think. But I lived with a lady in Oklahoma who was a barrel horse trainer, and she was very successful at it. And she introduced me to the world of hackamores, and it really opened my eyes. The pony hackamore is the #1 seller for the Performance Pony Company. What's cool about a hackamore is if you've got a horse that's either been yanked and jerked and pulled on, or that's super sensitive, and just doesn't seem like you can ever find a bit that works for him, you can use a hackamore. Or if you've got a horse that's just quit responding, the hackamore gives us a whole new, like a new canvas, because we're doing something different. It's different pressure points. And that introduces just a whole new world for our horse. When you use a hackamore, you want to do some groundwork with them first, like bit them up with it, ask them to come around with it. You want to make sure that they're used to it, because otherwise they will run off in it. If they're not sure what you're asking, it can scare them. But this hackamore actually has an amazing amount of bend. This is called the DTE hack. It's also made by JD Morrow. But it has a lot of bend and a lot of whoa, and almost all my horses, I will ride around in a hackamore when I'm not performing on them. If there's just like I call them tune-up days where I'm going to do something different with them, I want to use something like this to keep their mouth soft and fresh, so that when I go back to my bit, they're paying attention to the bit. If you ride your horses in the same bit all the time, it's kind of like writing with the same pencil all the time. You get dull after a while. You need to do something to sharpen them up a little. So if you can ride them, sometimes if you ride in a more aggressive bit, if they're a high strung horse and they need more when you go faster or you compete on them, which generally is what happens, they get excited and then they push through it. So you need a little bit more aggressive bit when you compete. Then you want to bring it down a notch when you do your slow work and stuff. Other time, and again, this depends on your hands. Sometimes you're the one who gets amped up and you're more aggressive when you compete. And so you want to actually ride in something more aggressive and then back off on your horse when you're going to go compete, so you don't overdo things. But that's knowing your horses, knowing your ponies, and knowing yourself. But this is a hackamore. I haven't ridden in just any hackamore, but I've used this one in the Wild Child headstall and then the Performance Pony Company hackamores, and they've been a game changer. Like I said, it's a fresh canvas, it's something different, and so those are really good to use. Let's see. I have more bits back here, as you can see, but that's kind of a general synopsis. So I'm going to take some questions, starting with Finley.
Do you think a chain, a curb is better, or a leather?
I think that totally depends on your horse. If you have a sensitive horse that pays attention and you don't have really any issues, I think that a leather curb is just fine. I like a leather curb. But I don't mind. I ride probably most of my horses in chains because I use my bits on a lot of different horses. But my more sensitive horses, I'll definitely put a leather curb on them. My colts, I start them in the leather curb as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sheridan, you bet.
So I have a horse. She's been ridden in a hackamore for most of her life, and she doesn't like to put a bit in, doesn't like to ride around in a bit, but she really pushes through a hackamore.
Okay, you muted yourself.
Oh,
there you go. Do you ever use like a martingale with your hackamore, or a?
I haven't put anything with it. I've just put a hackamore with it so far.
Okay, I would try using something like a running martingale with your hackamore. That's going to give you kind of like a gag effect, so that when they push against it, when she's rooting out against it, there's something besides your hands. There's a different force that's helping stabilize that. There are some people who use tie downs too. So that's an option with a hackamore as well. You could try that. But I would try the martingale first. I used to have a really powerful barrel horse that he'd kind of been overrun as a 3-year-old, and we got him as a 5-year-old, and he was kind of wild and strong. And I put that hackamore, I just showed you the DTE hack on there with the martingale, and that really got him coming back around. I didn't run him in it a lot, but I worked him in it a lot, and that made a huge difference. So that's what I would recommend for that. Jace.
Where you can buy the Wild Child hackamore.
Oh, the Wild Child hackamore. I'll have to get back to. I think it's Cow Horse Supply. is where that one's at.
Okay.
I will say the DTE hack is pretty similar to that. I would probably, but it's usually a little bit cheaper. I think the Wild Child headstall or hackamore is like 175 and the DTE I think is 125. So that makes a difference. Chelsea.
Is it better to use more bits depending on your horse, or is it good to find one to stick with for doing different events?
Well, if you're going to be doing different events, I think it can be helpful to have different bits. Like if you're going to rope, use one for roping. And if you're going to run barrels, use one for running barrels. Now, if you have a good old solid horse that knows what he's doing and you just need to stay out of his way, you just let that horse do what makes him happy. You don't need to go changing things. Like don't fix what isn't broken. If what you're doing is working, then you just keep on keeping on. I do think it's good to have a bit that you can like fine tune them. Like, so if I'm going to go, it doesn't matter how much I've been competing or how much I've been practicing or anything like that. Every now and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to take it back to the basics. I'm going to have a fundamentals day where all we're going to work on is giving to the bit, flexing, moving their shoulders, moving their hips, moving their rib cage side to side, lifting up, crossing over in the front end, kicking out their hips, doing really slow wall work, just working on those perfect little movements. I try to have at least one of those days every other week. These guys are athletes and they need to be able to, we have to fine tune them and make sure that they're going just like us. We need to go back to the basics and have a strong foundation to come back to all the time. So I like to have a bit that I use for that. And that's going to be different for every horse. You might find though that for your hands, I think what I've heard is most trainers have 5 bits that they use in general. I would say that for me right now, I've been roping a lot and there's about 5 bits that I use on most of my horses with my hands, but I change them out between different horses at different times for different purposes. So that's just part of becoming a horseman or a horsewoman is trying a million different bits and figuring out what works for your hands. But as I kind of got on before, the number one thing in my opinion is your body position. If your body position isn't correct on your horse, it doesn't matter what bit you use, it won't work like it needs to. Your body position, you've got to be centered and you've got to learn how to control your abs and your hips before you can even before you're going to fix your problems with a bit. You will not fix your problems with a bit if you don't have your body structure correct. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is it also helpful to have like a trainer help you find the right bit?
Definitely. Yeah. If you've got somebody who can watch you ride, who has more experience, I get lessons, like I've been doing this for a while and I went to a roping yesterday and roped as good as I have in a long time. And the first thing that I did this morning was send videos to a couple different people who could tell me what I could do better. I think you should always have a coach. You should always have somebody different that you go ride with, and go with different people. You can learn something from so many people. When I was just training horses, and really getting into it and running barrel horses a lot and pro rodeoing, I had all kinds of friends that I would go ride with and ask questions with and send videos to. But you always want to make sure that you're leveling up too. Like you can help others. But they have the quote that you are the accumulation of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. So when it comes to leveling up your horsemanship, you want to ride with people that ride or rope or barrel race or whatever who are better than you. There's the other quote about like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're limiting yourself or something along those lines. You don't want to be that person. You want to surround yourself with better. I went to a roping yesterday and I got second in the average. And like I said, I rope better than I've roped in a long time. Like I put the videos out on social media because I was proud of it. And I still got smoked by a kid who's 16 years old. So it's, and I was glad to be there. And I was glad to watch him rope and it made me hungrier for it. And like, my goal is to have a match roping against him and be able to beat him here in the next month or 2. Like that's where I want to be, but I have to be around people who are better horsemen, better ropers for me to get to where I want to go. So yes, you definitely want to get help from others. The other thing about it is, even if you've gotten to where you're pretty confident and you're doing really good, somebody else is going to see those little things that you've created habits of that you don't even realize has happened. So that's really nice too, because you might have started leaning just a little bit or pulling back instead of pulling out. Those little things are things that we get in the habit of and we don't even realize we're doing. So definitely good to have somebody else watch and help.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I had a question in the chat. I don't know how to read the chat right now. So if you typed it in the chat, please say it out loud if you could. I think Amanda did. You have one with Jace.
Sorry, I couldn't get it unmuted. So Jason's hate horse, Chopper, fades off real bad, loping to the left, and he's real dull, loping to the left. Well, Jason's question was, is there a bit that can fit that, or do you think that it might be a saddle issue? We've had his teeth worked on and have had him pop, and no improvement.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he ropes real good running straight.
Okay. Have you tried bidding him up?
No.
Okay.
He flexes real well.
Okay.
He gives to it, just loping. He just gets real dull.
Have you had a vet look at him?
No, I haven't had him vet checked. That's
probably what I would do. If he's flexing and he has the movement to do it,
Right.
Does he walk in a circle nicely and quietly?
Yep. When you're walking him, he's fine. It's just when he lopes to the left, he just fades off real bad, and Jace can't get him collected to the left. So
yeah, if you've had him to the chiropractor and done that, and he's still got something, I would say probably have a vet look at him. How old is he?
7.
Maybe. Yeah, and he might just be going through some growth changes right now. Some people say that, like, oh, when they're 5 they're done, or when they're 6 they're done. I don't believe they're done until they're like 7 or 8. So
he didn't get started until he was almost 4 or 5.
Yeah, so it could just be that he's got a little inflammation somewhere. Something else that you can do if you guys are like, gosh, this horse is just, I can't tell if he's sore or if he's just being a pain right now. Like, I have a 16 one-hand 3, I guess he's 4 now, and he's just a giant. And like, I am kind of in that phase where I can't quite tell if it's because he's going through growing pains, if it's because he doesn't understand, if it's because he's sore. Like, I don't know what it is. So last time my vet was here, she said, just put him on bute for 10 days, 2 grams for 10 days. And that will knock out a lot of any inflammation, any minor inflammation that's causing things. If he's still sore after that, then we know that we really have something. If that doesn't fix it, and sometimes it's just like us, like we just need that little boost to knock out some inflammation. That's something that you can try, especially if he's 7 and he's just getting started. I'd probably do that first. And if you see a big improvement, then you can call your vet and say, hey, try it, see if it works for a couple weeks. If he starts to go backwards, then you know what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sarah, you bet. Sarah.
Okay, yes. How long should you work a horse in a new bit to see if it's a good fit for that horse or it's not a good fit?
That's a really good question. I think if you throw a bit in a horse's mouth and they just instantly are not happy, you're going to take it off. Try something different. If you try one on them and you're like, I think they kind of like it, I can see improvements here, but I'm not really sure. Try it for 3 days. If after 3 days it's not working, then switch it up. That's kind of my rule of thumb.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Yeah. Anybody? Kai, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Camry,
Yes, sir. You're breaking up.
Miss Camry,
Yes.
my pony rides in $1 million bid, but she's gagging. How do I help her?
Okay, she's like, are you saying like she's gapping her mouth open?
Yes,
Yes.
gagging.
Okay. If you could send me a video, that would really help. to see that. I think like the videos that I saw in your runs before, do you run her in a tie down as well, Kai?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You might try just a different kind of bit. If she's gapping her mouth in that, you might try something something that is a little bit more solid than that. This is what I think. I'll look at, if you can send me some videos, that'll help. I'll look at some videos and see what your body position is and stuff too, because it might have something to do with your hands as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thanks. Anybody else have any? Yes, Sierra.
What is the difference between a round port and a square port?
That's a good question. So like this is a square port, right? Versus a round port. So a square port, we don't have quite as much room in between the tongue and the pressure that it's going to put on the roof of the mouth. This is going to be a little bit more aggressive because it's square than round. Round's going to form a little bit more. Square is going to have a little bit more pointiness to it. So it's going to be a little bit more aggressive when you have a square port. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
You bet. Anybody else? Does anybody have questions about BitFit? Do you want me to demonstrate that real quick? Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'll see if I can make this work with this little guy. I'm gonna start with the Hackamore just because I just had this on him. So this is a little horse. I do ride big horses most of the time now. I don't really have many ponies anymore. Technical pony. This is actually size-wise, he's a pony, but he does have real horse papers. But he's just a little guy. So with him, I'm gonna have to pay attention too, because he's got like a small horse head. So I can probably use most horse bits on him, but so your average horse bit is going to be 5 1/4 inches wide. So your horse, if you have a horse with a small mouth, those can be way too big. If it's gapping out of both sides of that horse's mouth, the pressure is not going to be applied like it needs to be. So you want to make sure like that it just has a little bit of room on each side so it doesn't pinch. If it has more than that, then it's going to be too much. And then you're going to have problems. So this is with the Hackamore. Like I said, we're going to start with that. You can adjust a Hackamore in different things. Sorry about that. In different places for different results. So a horse's nose, you can Google it. It's going to be, obviously it's thicker here, thick, and then it gets really thin when it gets down here. So you want to be careful. Like I personally am not a fan of bits that are, or nosebands that sit all the way down here. You'll see that sometimes, but I think that's getting pretty fragile down there. That bone is really thin. It's not a fan of. I think you have to get down there. You need to work on your horsemanship more than your bit. That's my personal opinion. So I like, with this little horse, I'd probably put this up one more notch. Where it's going to sit, you can see this is the wild child, and we want to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the cheekbones. Like we want to make sure that whatever we do isn't going to interfere with that, because if it gets to bumping those cheekbones, then we're going to have problems. They're going to be getting frustrated about that. This, when it's down a little bit lower, we're going to have a little bit more collection because it's going to ask him to bring his nose down. If we have it up a little bit higher, then it's going to just not have quite as much pressure there. But the higher it is, the more pressure you have to bring your horse's whole head around, because of the way that the shank, the cheek piece, is going to put pressure on that head. It's going to bring that nose all the way around. If you have it lower and you pull, then you're going to have a little bit more, you're going to get a little bit more flex and bend on it. But I like to have it, when this is adjusted correctly, about like that. That's where I'm going to put it on most of my horses. The other thing to remember when you have a hackamore, you need a smaller head stall. Usually like the Performance Pony Company head stalls do work good on these hackamores. That's what this one is because it's got shorter holes and this sits higher. Your bit's going to sit right here. This is going to take off like 3 to 4 inches. So make sure you have a smaller head stall for those so you can adjust them correctly. Yes, Chelsea.
You have to make sure it fits. So then if you're riding it and it doesn't fit, it will go down more.
Yes. Yep. That'll make a difference. Like this hackamore, you can see how this comes back quite a ways on him. This is on the verge of too big for this little horse because of how far this sits back. I can get by with it on him, but ideally this would sit more up there. The other thing, if you buy a hackamore and you find that it's sitting up here, a hackamore or a combination bit, and it's up in your horse's eye, your noseband is too short. So you need to send it back to wherever you got it and ask them to make you a new noseband because that's too short. And if it's all the way back here and it's like falling off of them, then it's too long. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any questions about how this fits? No? Okay, let me grab a bit real quick. So I'm gonna do one without a shank and then I'll do one, or without a gag, and then I'll do one with the gag. And this little horse I just got, well, I got him and I already sold him, but he really needs his teeth done. So I've been riding him in a hackamore. But I sold him. They know that he needs his teeth done. So he'll still ride around okay, but he, you can just tell that they're really sharp. So this bit fits about right, just like that. So one thing that you'll hear sometimes is like that you want to see 2 wrinkles. You want to see him smile. And when they say that, what they mean is like right in here, you'll see that there's a wrinkle. Some people will say 1 wrinkle. Some people will say 2. You know, some people would say that this needs to be up tighter. I think, in my opinion, where it's got a little bit of a wrinkle, it's sitting snug in his mouth. He's not fiddling with it. If your horse is constantly like licking his lips and trying to pick that bit up into his mouth, it's too loose. You want it to be just to where it fits nice. It's kind of like a belt. Like when you see people walking around with a belt that's too loose and they're constantly having to pick up their pants, you know, like nobody likes that, right? And so that's kind of the same thing with our horse and these, with those bits. You want it to be snug enough that it's going to keep that bit in their mouth where it needs to fit to function, but not so tight that it's uncomfortable. So that's kind of a good way to think about it. So that's, you want it to be the same on both sides. With our curb here, one of my biggest pet peeves too, if you have snap rein, make sure that you always unsnap one so that you don't risk stepping in it or your horse stepping in it and having problems. Let me see if I can get him to come on. Okay, so with our curb, this one has a chain curb on it. It came with it. This, if I come down here, if you pull on this, if you see how like that goes all the way forward, that's not, our curb has to go this far before it's really engaged. So we're not having a very quick reaction. If you're heavy-handed, maybe you don't need a super quick reaction. But I'm gonna want this to be a little bit snugger. He's being patient at least. So here, when I put 2 fingers flat back here, there's very little pressure. When I pull, now I can feel the pressure and it doesn't move forward as far. You just want to make sure that those bits are in a way that they sit in their mouth and they're just there when we're not doing anything. And as soon as we ask, there's something there. Okay, any questions about that? Good. All right. Let me grab a gag bit and then we'll okay, so this one's got the super gag on it that I call super gag. This one's also made by JD Morrow. It's a pretty popular bit in the barrel racer world. A gag bit's also one that you want to make sure that you have the right size headstall on. If you like this one, it's going to need a pony size headstall. Does everybody know the difference between a brow band and a single ear, and why you use a brow band and not a single ear sometimes? Hackamores, I recommend using a brow band if you can, because they are easier to rub off than a bit. So as you can see, this is way too loose. He is trying to get this bit where it sits comfortably. So if you see your horse doing this, he's saying, I can't get it where it needs to be. His belt is too loose. So I need to snug that up. Okay. So that's better, but it's still a little loose. Oops, sorry, bud. Okay. So there, we still want it to fit the same. So it's gonna fit just like our other bit did that didn't have any. We still want to see underneath of there. We still want it to fit in there snug and comfortable so that he's not gapping his mouth like he was before when we put it on. But here, as I want him to turn, it's just going to give him a little warning, a little warning, a little warning, a little warning. And you can see just how this horse, he's never had this bit on and he's already wanting to tuck up with it. Let's see if I can. And this, he might say, this is way too much. I'm just an old trail horse. When you're putting a new bit on a horse too, if you can do this, or if you're too short, you can come here and kind of pull a little bit and see how they're going to react. If they throw their head up right away, or start really chomping, or they're really uncomfortable, that might be a bad sign. Another thing you can do is come around here. Like he's short, so I can do this. Whoa. So if I'm going to change a bit, like especially if I'm going to change a bit drastically on a horse, I want to make sure that I do this groundwork first. I don't want to put my horse in danger. I don't want to put myself in danger or anything like that. So, whoa. And you want to give them time to react. This is new for them. Don't just come and start yanking on them like you did in your last bit. Good. Whoa. And they're going to move around with you. Make sure you talk to them. Let them know what you're asking. Once they do it, really praise them. Ooh. Try to put your hand, just really think about what's the position that I want to be on when I'm on my horse. Where do I want my hands? And you want to kind of try to apply that same pressure. There we go. That's good. This is going to be too much for this little horse. He's responsive enough. I'm not hardly touching him and he's backing up or trying to do other things. So he doesn't need something that's this intense at this point in his life. It's not really intense, but he doesn't need this much gag. Here he's a little bit stiffer and I have him against the wall. There, he gave to it. I don't know if you guys probably can see that, but anyway, that's things that you can do. Bitting a horse up. If you have a horse that really pushes into the bit really bad, we can talk about that another time if you want to learn about it, but it's where you're not on their back, so you don't have to worry about your pressure. I like to tie it back to like the D-rings of the saddle so it's solid. And then you just kind of let your horse move around and figure out how to adjust that bit as he needs. You want to do that with a snaffle bit. It really helps soften them up. You can do it to each side too if you need to. Some people are really big fans of that. I don't do it real often, but every now and then if I have a horse that's just being hard-headed, I do like to bit them up because it takes the pressure off of me and lets them figure it out on their own. So that can be a helpful tool to know as well. All right. Does anybody else have any last questions? Yes, Elizabeth. And then Finley, if you had a question, you can go after that.
Hi, my daughters are in 4-H, and some of the classes they're in, so for example, pleasure classes, they have to ride one-handed.
Uh-huh.
Do you that you like to ride one-handed in? I just feel like we ride two-handed so much when we try to move into the one-handed. For me, I feel like my horses are stiff that way, and I know that's a training thing too, but I didn't know if you have a preference on bits that work better for when they're single-handed.
Yeah, I'm usually going to ride in something that's a little bit stiffer if I'm going to ride one-handed, because
Sure.
I don't want this movement as much. So just something like this mouthpiece, something that's Mullen or something like this, I
Okay.
like. So then if you need to turn a little bit, then you
Sure.
can still use that pinky and get a little bit of individual pressure. I personally am not a fan of the 4-H rules. Like, I'm okay with the one-handed, but the
Sure.
whole bit thing, that gets me. Like, let's get with the times, guys. Safety first, right?
Perfect. Thank you.
That's my opinion, but I'm also not. I only did 4-H for 2 years for a reason.
Sure.
So.
Nope, and I have some of those mylar bits. Some of them don't have as much port in it. Is that okay that they don't have as much port, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's just whatever your horse needs.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, Finley, go ahead.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought I saw your name pop up in the bottom. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Perfect. Well, I hope you guys learned some stuff. If you have any questions about anything specific, please reach out to me. Like I said in the beginning, I'm here to help you. I want you to be successful. I want you to win. This is my opinion. This is what works for me. Like we talked about before, go try a bunch of bits, have somebody else watch you, have somebody else watch your horse, and learn what works for you. Your hands are different from my hands. My hands are different from your hands. Our strength is different. Our knowledge is different. Our body, like just the posture. I'm 5'2". You might be 5'10". So the way that your horse responds to you is going to be different. So try them out. There's a lot of great bits out there, but just learn as much as you can about them and have fun with it. Like, just remember it's fun. Work on your body position. Fix your body before you worry about the bit. But make sure you look at that. Just try to you got to put the package together, and it just takes time. So have grace for yourself, have grace for your horses, especially when you're learning and trying new things. They're trying to make you happy. They are not here to frustrate you on purpose. If they're frustrated, it's not because they want to be. So have grace with them. Always take responsibility for them. Whether or not they're having a bad day, you are their parent. When you step on their back, when you agreed to call them yours, they became your responsibility. Therefore, if there's anything wrong with them, it's up to you to fix it. They do not know how to fix this stuff on their own. So be able to say, like, hey, we had a bad day. I'm really sorry, buddy. What do we got to do to fix it? Like, I'm going to try to help you fix this. We're going to work together. We're not going to go yank and jerk and pulling on our horses. The number one rule in our barn is if you say can't, you have to run 2 laps. If you yank or jerk or pull on your horse excessively, you have to run 2 laps. You have to do jumping jacks and you have to do push-ups. It's not acceptable. So take responsibility for that. They love you and you love them. So just remember that at the end of the day. Treat them like you want to be treated. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a great night. Like I said, let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Have a
Who
great
says
week.
bye too? Finley, did you have a last question?
My aunt is Kian Hayes.
Oh,
I don't know
cool.
if you know her.
I do. You'll have to tell her hello.
Okay.
All right. And bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.